Welcome to the Darshan Talks Pharmacy live stream and podcast. We discuss pharmacy entrepreneurship and issues that may arise. If you like these videos and podcasts, please like, leave a comment, please subscribe. Hey guys, really excited to be here. I get to have just Rudy today. Discussing primarily right now is sort of the SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats if you get into the assisted living facility world as a pharmacy. Rudy, this was actually a space that you are very familiar with. So before we continue, do you want to introduce yourself?
Rudy Dajie, I'm a pharmacist and entrepreneur. I'm also a consultant and business advisor, board member, whatever you need, I can provide.
Start with the beginnings. You actually, when you started your business, did you start with assisted living facilities, or was that something you grew into?
We had a few, and to be honest, it wasn't something that we actually spent a lot of time growing. It wasn't a business focus. We really focused on behavioral health. But when I did work for the long-term care pharmacy in Connecticut, where I really cut my teeth and learned a lot about the sort of long-term care business or closed-door pharmacy business, we were one of the biggest providers of assisted living. So had a significant familiarity with packaging and assisted living. And we did a lot of compliance packaging in the pharmacy that I owned for organizations like Senior Whole Health, which are SCOs that keep people residing in their homes longer by compliance packaging. So you could essentially say that's sort of assisted living, except more work than assisted living.
So let's start from the beginning. You actually didn't focus on this, but it became a bigger and bigger part of your business as things continued. Is that fair?
No. Well, yes, the compliance packaging did, but assisted living specifically from a facilities perspective, with my own business that I owned, we did not focus on that business, and we did not grow the business. So we had some attrition, and we kept a few facilities, but it was not a focus of our business initiative. So
let's talk about delivering compliance packaging for home-based care. So talk to me a little bit about why that became an area. What were the strengths you saw for this space? Why do people get into the space?
Well, it's something that the business was doing when I acquired it. And at that point in time, it was also very inefficient. They're using like MTS multi-dose packs and hand filling those. And we would call it a schedule, is created from like Microsoft Excel, and you'd print that off, and it would have the patient's names and all their meds, and you'd tape it on the pack. And so it was just tremendously inefficient. And then we would deliver each of those packages once a week. So like 4 deliveries a month. So it was very inefficient, and there was a fair amount of opportunity to grow that business as well, because we could grow the radius, we could go out and solicit it, we could be a big provider for organizations like Senior Whole Health or Whole Calling Elderly Service. There's a bunch of different SCOs in my area that needed providers. And the upside of it was that we were getting a substantial packaging fee on top of reimbursements for the copays and filling the medications. So instead of just getting a straight $7 that we made on their Lisinopril, we were also getting a packaging fee every month, which was substantial. And we were doing all their MTM for those patients too. So we'd have students doing the MTM and the preceptors overseeing it. So there were a fair amount of different revenue streams that made sense. So what I did once I came in is we went to delivering all 4 packs at the same time. So we weren't doing weekly deliveries anymore. We went to monthly deliveries. The challenge becomes that when changes occur, you got to send a pack that is going to reflect the change, collect the other packs that are remaining, modify those for the change, and get them back to the patient. So that can be challenging when you're dealing with patients that are very elderly, and they may not know where they are, they may not have taken them accurately. we didn't get them, you don't always get them back. So there is some challenges associated with dealing with non-medical staff, right? So or just dealing with people in general versus a medical staff where we're not going to talk about assisted living, but you may be interacting with a nurse in assisted living that can say, okay, I got the packs and this is where things are at, versus somebody just residing in the community.
You talked about this idea of moving to monthly. Did you find that actually reduced your packaging costs? Because now you're still doing the same amount of packaging, because you have fewer deliveries, it just becomes one package, and therefore there's a drop in packaging costs and packaging revenue.
Well, we were filling all 4 packs at the same time anyway. We were just storing them and then dispensing them. It really reduced my delivery burden, right? So instead of me doing 4 deliveries a month times 200 patients, I went to do 1 delivery a month. So it really was a reduction in delivery burden, which is a tremendous cost. Right? So delivery costs, cars, vehicles, expenses, fuel, insurance, drivers, and taking those drivers away from being able to deliver to my other customer base. So that was really the savings there. So
they didn't see those 4 as a single delivery. Sorry, as a single package. They saw them as 4 separate packages.
Yeah, I would say week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. We put the date range on them so that people know what to start. But then after that, we migrated to a packaging system called Dispill, where they actually had software associated with it. And when you print the labels, it has all their information, and it integrates with your operating system, and it also integrated with SynMed. So then we migrated to running all of those things off automation, and which added a lot more efficiencies, but some complexities as well, because everything doesn't always tie together still.
So for those people who are considering doing something like this now, what do you think about the Pillpack model, where they take all those pills and they basically put it into like a roll, and it's each dose that's all dispensed together?
That's the same thing as what I was running on Dispill, except it's out of a roll, right? And bag system. We had an AutoMed when I was in Connecticut, and we ran that same system. I think that is an ideal system. It is one of the most efficient systems. A lot of places just don't like it, and a lot of people that are sort of geriatric have trouble with it because they're all just white bags. I think now that you can get some that are colored systems where it can identify AMPM a lot easier. But it wasn't probably the most user-friendly system for our patient population, so we never migrated to doing that. And then changes become difficult with those systems as well, because now you're just doing a lot of taping and cutting with rolls everywhere, trying to it's like a lot of arts and crafts with that versus just printing it, or you got to rerun the roll, and then what do you do with the pack that came back? There's just a lot. It's a lot of logistics, no matter what packaging system you're using on multi-dose, unless you go hard and fast with once it's out, patient makes the change and they live with it. If there's an addition, you send the addition in a separate pack or a separate roll. And if it's a subtraction, they figure it out themselves. There's a lot of places that do that, and I applaud them for being able to do that, because I could never get our patient base to accept that was the way it was going to be. And even in the payers, they weren't going to accept the way that was the way it was going to be. It would just they thought there was just too much that people wouldn't be able to manage it.
So when you talked about payers, for example, one of the things we spoke about in the context of skilled nursing facilities was the fact that you weren't involved with the payers. Essentially, capitated payment went to the nursing home and they paid you the portion that they did. How does that change, if at all, in the context of home-based care?
Yeah, all these people are either on Medicaid or Medicare Part D from day one, right? So, okay. But if we're working with a SCO, there usually is a packaging fee, right? So the packaging fee is paid by the SCO. And so they're the payer for that as well, right? And they're also the payer, they contract with the PBM, so that they're also part of, the payer from that standpoint. And you can work with them on rates a little bit.
So theoretically, again, you're not billing the payers each time and dealing with rejections and all that stuff. That's being managed at the SCO itself, at the SCO level itself.
No, we're still billing like Express Scripts or Caremark.
Okay.
Yeah, and collecting copays, and it's just the same as a person on Med D. So it's and then the only thing that we're billing the pay, like the SCO for, is the packaging fee. So they'll get a monthly bill that says like, here's all of the patients we delivered to, and times X dollars equals whatever you owe us for packaging for the month.
And who handles things like the MTM fee?
So that we usually would do through Outcomes or Marixa, and all their patients would be loaded on that platform. And then Outcomes and Marixa send you a check.
Oh, interesting. So they send you the check.
Yeah, everything's outsourced. Nobody wants to actually manage anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess what I was trying to figure out is reimbursement wise, like when I think of PBMs, when I think of like retail pharmacy, right? What you're often dealing with is the situation of it's retail pharmacy. You reach out to a PSAO or you reach out to an individual PBM and you bill them. That might also be for commercial payers. That might be for essentially Medicare or Medicaid or whatever it is. When you start dealing with sort of home-based care and all of those situations, things get a little bit more complicated. MTM, for example, I didn't know if this is seen to be part of some kind of bundle payment system. And as a result of that, are you dealing with someone who collects all the money and then distributes it themselves? Or so go ahead.
No, the SCO just gets their own funding from the state or from Medicare Part D or however, and then we're just billing a bin PCN on their plan that they've contracted with. So if they've contracted with ESI, then or Caremark, then we're getting our contracted long-term care through our GPO rates for that patient base.
Okay.
So
that's just for the product. That's just for the product.
Correct. The only other thing that you can negotiate is that packaging fee.
Right.
But
then the MTM
that you bill directly to the SCO, and you don't get that with other things. Like I can't just say like you walked in off the street and said, "Hey, listen, I want you," or Pillpack, right? Like the patients that they have they're just eating that fee. Like they're not, or they may charge somebody that fee, but otherwise the packaging is the packaging. Like a lot of times in assisted living facilities, they require you to pack the meds in compliance packaging, and you don't get to charge for doing that. You just get the opportunity to have that patient base, right? So sometimes, or a lot of times, pharmacies just have to eat that.
Interesting.
Part of just doing business.
So I'm trying to think about, let's say I am the next Pillpack, right? And I'm deciding that I want to get into the space. One option is sort of just swallowing some of the fees just to get market share. That's one angle. The other angle is to add in efficiencies. If those efficiencies can be in the billing space so that you actually spend less money trying to bill all this stuff out. Another might be using tools like Alexa and the like to start saying, I want to have that MTM done remotely. Have you seen much conversation around remote MTM and how has that been, if at all?
I have not. I to be honest with you, I sort of tried going down that road and I got my hand slapped, right? Like, like a student go with an iPad and then like the pharmacist be at the pharmacy and, the board of pharmacy wasn't very happy about that. They said, you can't do that. And I'm like, that's okay, but somebody could call in with their own iPad and I could do that.
So the issue is the patient should be able to reach back out to you, but if you want to reach out to the patient, that needs to be done by the pharmacist individually, is what you're saying, is what they're saying.
Yeah, essentially but I don't even think there is protocol to say that if the patient, if we shipped an iPad to them and they were somehow capable of operating an iPad, like 90 years old and barely speaks any English, that's legitimately the demographic, and there's nothing wrong with saying that, and they can somehow get on and we're able to communicate, they still don't think that that's probably MTM. I don't know if they've gotten to that point where they have said that is acceptable and that that is considered an MTM consultation or not. And I think it probably varies state to state on whether the legalities of that. And you'd be best to speak about the legalities, not me. But I just do things and then beg for forgiveness.
Which really takes us now to the risks, because I feel like
it's all a risk.
The Rudy model of operations, and we can say that now because you don't own a company that does this anymore. What about the Rudy model of operations, of begging for forgiveness, and tell me more about your experience with that. Like, what are some areas that you sort of tried to innovate, but either you got slapped down, or you're seeing more competition and that's going to affect reimbursement or profitability in some way?
I mean, just the whole idea of compliance or adherence packaging or cycle medications was novel when I started doing it back in 2012. Like, people are like, what? That's crazy. And, people don't spend the time to think about it, right? It's like, well, that's 13 fills a year. That's 13 dispense fees a year, right? So like, that's revenue, and you're able to line things up, right? You can't line things up if you go on a monthly basis. Like, some months are 30, some months are 31, some months are 28, right? So then people don't also know when to expect to get their meds because everything is not aligned perfectly, right? So cycling medications was something that was innovative, and people really didn't understand it. They struggled with it. My team struggled with it at first. And like I said, we talked about before I was on that island, like, everybody's like, this is nuts. You know, what's wrong with you? You need to take your meds. And like, plenty of meds, but I was on that island, right? So, but eventually people got it, and now it's sort of become the standard in long-term care is to go to that route in ALF and behavioral health and all of those different organizations. So that was something that really I generally try to push boundaries on everything, because I think like an entrepreneur, and I try to be efficient about things, and I always am looking for, like, what are the opportunities, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. When we would have dispensing events, I decided that I was going to bring in an outside consulting company that would do its own analysis of our organization and would report back to the board of pharmacy. And that was extremely novel, right? I was saying, hey, listen, I'm not going to just report back to you that we're doing everything right. I'm going to have an outside consulting company come in, and they're going to report back to you. So you can see that we're going above and beyond, and we're not just hiding things, or we're not doing things the way I want to do them. We're going to have a reputable organization come in. So I've done things like that sort of move the needle and take the onus off the business and allow me to conduct business and perform business the way I want to do business, and now push that burden onto somebody else so they can manage that. So, I mean, those are some of the things.
Well, you sort of hinted at this, but I want to get a clearer understanding. What I'm seeing you talk about is you pushed a bunch of different boundaries, and that got your hand slapped a few times. But what if I was opening up my own sort of home delivery care pharmacy system, or sort of hot pharmacy? In that situation, what are you seeing as the risks of opening up a location like that, or a system like that? Are you obviously we'll say legal changes, just sort of a general throwaway, but are you seeing competition? And if so, what does the competition do that wasn't doing 5 years ago?
Well, I think that there is competition in space, because I think there's a fair amount of money being made in it, and everybody, I think, is trying to get into a position to. There's a lot of retail pharmacies that are trying to sort of hedge their bets and say, like, I want to be able to stay alive, and compete against CVS. So I'm going to go after things that they don't really want to go after, and they should. But what they really should do is, like most organizations that have dabbled, is said, all right, we've dabbled enough. Carve this piece off into a long-term care, get contracted with a group purchasing organization like MHA or Innovatics or GeriMed, and get significantly better reimbursements and get significantly better purchasing opportunities. And in turn, you'll have much better profit margins and also some protections from DIR and things of that nature. But I don't think a lot of people do that. I think they just keep doing it out of their retail pharmacy, and they're this hybrid model, and they think that, oh, like, I'm going to go to Innovatics and do the hybrid contract. Like, they're still missing out on so much. So I would push people tremendously to say, like, find a space, create a separate box, push as much into this space, and go long-term care. And keep your retail for the people that are walking in. But if you're delivering out of your retail and compliance packaging and blister cards and servicing behavioral health organizations and assisted living, and you're doing it all out of retail reimbursements, you're nuts. There's no point in doing that. Like, you're leaving money on the table, and those are the things that just drive me crazy. Like, when I walk in somewhere and I'm trying to work with somebody, I'm like, what are you doing? So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers the question. What was the question?
Well, we were talking about just risks and.
So yeah, I mean, I think that there's a fair amount of competition. I think that the risks are minimal. I don't see this going away. I see the government incentivizing more people to remain at home and get compliance packaging, as well as more of these SCOs getting funds to supply compliance packaging for people to remain in their homes. And I see growth in that space, and I also see growth in assisted living. So I think there's plenty out there to do and get done. I think the challenges are dealing with a population that there could be language barriers, there could be just dementia, things of that nature, and you're not dealing with anybody other than the healthcare practitioner in their office and you don't have a nurse that's seeing them, you don't have anybody that's seeing them on a frequent basis, and they don't necessarily, we spend the time to educate them on how to use the packaging, but that doesn't necessarily always mean they're going to use it appropriately. And you have people that don't use it appropriately, and then you have, medication events because of it, et cetera. So I think those are always going to be the risks and challenges. And even if it's not necessarily a pharmacy-related issue, but a medication event occurs, for some reason, our boards always say, well, send me 500 pages on how you could have prevented this. And there's nothing I could do other than to go hand them the meds when they're due at that moment in time, which is some of the stuff that I've talked about in the past, is that I think boards of pharmacy need to be more mindful of like what's going on out there and and sort of everything's not just cookie cutter. And
so we've talked a little bit about the threats as we just talked about, or risks, if you want to call them. But let's go back to the opportunities. We spoke a little bit about technology being used. I've seen versions of people talking about like Pyxis-like systems or other technology being sort of home-based. What has been your experience with those? Do you think that it causes opportunities, or is that just another delivery mechanism, or what's your take on that?
No, I mean, I think there are a number of different technologies out there, right? There's technology that will spit the meds out when they're supposed to be spit out, and there's telecommunication tools where they're tied into their Wi-Fi, so like you can call them and talk to them and tell them to take their meds or notice that they didn't take their meds. So I think technology is going to be hugely important and continue to adapt and grow within our industry. I think the regulations and laws will slowly change to allow for these things better, but right now I feel like it's a lagger, versus having things preemptively in place to allow entrepreneurism and innovation. It's always, hey, we have this product, we want you to allow us to do X, Y, and Z, and then they have to demonstrate why, versus having systems in place for products to be tried, right? There should be like, hey, just like, I don't know, maybe it's a bad example, like orphan drugs. Like there should be like a process by which you should be able to say, we have this technology, we'd like to beta trial it in the state of X, Y, and Z, and we're asking for leeway on this for you to understand. And then once we have the results, we're going to come back and show you why this should be fine. And we don't have that. And it varies state to state, right? I've worked with a company called ManCheck, and they have Dosis robots, and they're a tremendous robot for blister packing. And I had 4 of them. And I help them build their technology, and I help them improve their technology, and I help them with their business model as well. And they go state to state, and sometimes they're able to get states to say that they don't need to do a PV2 on the product, right? Because the packaging is so good that a technician can look at it, and the technology is so good that it's going to drop in based on NDC and everything else. So the PV1 is fine, and the PV2 is unnecessary because the technology is that good. And some states have said they're fine with it, and it goes out the door. And other states are saying that they're not fine with it.
We can keep sort of exploring this. There's obviously a whole different discussion on just assisted living overall. But before we go, any last words?
No, I mean, I just think that there's a lot of place for technology and innovation. And I think that the healthcare space has been, laggard, whatever the term is, forever, right? I mean, we've just gone to a space where everything has to be e-prescribed, and there's still doctors that can opt out. We've literally just gotten to a place where fax machines are not important or shouldn't be anymore.
Fair enough. So the technology is moving at a glacial pace, and that provides opportunities for pharmacists who are entrepreneurial to possibly have conversations and find efficiencies that other people are not looking at right now. So something to consider. Rudy, thank you so much again for doing this. This was awesome.
These conversations are not intended to be legal, regulatory, or clinical advice and may not be right for you. These conversations are intended for educational purposes only. Conversations on this forum do not create an attorney-client relationship.